There has never been a market that doesn't have enough market share for you to hit your goals. Even here, we're in North Texas. In North Texas, if I was to capture 1% market share of the North Texas real estate market, even if it's the worst year,
sure,
it'd be like $1 billion in GCI or something like that, right? So the third thing I would say is we have to be careful around blaming the market for our woes as well. We should be appreciative of these times because everyone faces the same market challenges when they wake up every single day. It's how you respond to them and what you do. And I see agents that are getting back to the fundamentals, succeeding at a very high level. And I see agents that are looking for shiny objects as a way out of a difficult market environment, floundering and getting frustrated and acting like it's the market's fault. And that's not the case.
Hey everyone, welcome to Real Estate Success DFW. I am in a podcast studio. I've done one here prior, and we have Brian Force with us. Hey, how are you, Brian?
I'm excellent, brother. Thank you for having me and coming to our home stadium.
So Brian has been doing quite a few podcasts. Most of you probably have seen him. So in our audience, especially in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, he is not uncomfortable with this space. He's done a lot more podcasts than I have. So he's going to give me some cheats and some insights that no one else will share with me.
Oh, hey, you've already done a lot more than most people have. So that's a notch in your belt for sure, brother. Keep up the momentum.
Well, I appreciate it. I always like to start to make it easy, just to kind of cut into it. And, we're on the real estate. We're real estate agents. Some of us are real estate agents and we leverage a lot of things so other people can help all of us grow together. And then others are running out there doing all the work and buying and selling and doing all of the hats at the same time. But I always like to start, why in the world are you selling real estate? You could do anything, right? So why are you selling real estate?
It's a really great question. It goes back to when I first got into the business. So when I first got into the business 15 years ago now, wow, I used to be the young guy in this office. I have always been interested in building businesses that I felt had some sort of unlimited is maybe not the best word, but very few limitations to the upside. And so real estate for me when I was younger, I come from a family of real estate investors and other real estate agents as well. It wasn't something I was married to doing. When I saw a vision when I was younger for what I could scale a business to, this made more sense than anything else I was considering at the time. And I will tell you, real estate in my formative years was not the thing that I saw myself doing long term. It was something that I saw the younger version of myself saw doing because the barriers to entry were low enough and I had enough grit that I felt I can do this long enough to drive the capital that I need to go and invest in something else and to scale something else. Turns out all those other things that I scaled and were interested in just ended up being other real estate businesses. So I've been here ever since. I think that it's easier to scale a business when you start to learn an enormous amount about it. And just by proxy, being in this business for so long, every vision that comes to my head of what's the next thing that we can build, what's the next thing that we can scale, ends up just being another vertical of the same business. So I'm trapped here now, and I love it.
I love that. So you don't use the term, when we were coming up with some topics and things I wanted to cover, because you've got a lot of things you've already covered before, you didn't use the term agent, you used entrepreneurship and entrepreneur. So I think having a perspective of what people do and when they're real estate business and just thinking as an agent, maybe you're looking at too limited, right? Because there's a lot of ways that you can build and make money in this business. You're obviously doing beyond just agency, but why would you use the term entrepreneur?
There are a couple of really big pet peeves of mine when it comes to verbiage that we use in this industry. From my coaching background, the difference between coaching and mentorship is a big pet peeve of mine. Those are two entirely different things. The other is agent and entrepreneur. I think the second that you get married to this idea of yourself as an agent and you stop thinking about yourself as an entrepreneur, you severely handicap your business. I got into this business to be an entrepreneur. I didn't get into this business actually to be a real estate agent. I am a real estate agent, and I very much enjoy being in service to my clients. I got into this business to build a true business. And I think one of the biggest inhibiting factors to agents scaling real estate businesses is they think of themselves solely as real estate agents and not as real estate business owners.
Sure.
And we could go down that rabbit hole for hours, but I think that verbiage matters a lot. And I think that many agents play too small and they define themselves as agents, and it limits their ability to really scale a real business. It keeps them in a box, even without them knowing it, I think, because I think the way that we talk to ourselves matters so much. So I always try to use the term entrepreneur because that's what we are, and I want those walls to come down for people.
Yeah, there is a lot of ways we can go about and describe and define entrepreneur versus agent. I always think what comes to mind, even in dealing with customers, right? We can look at customers as relational or transactional. Mm-hmm. Well, agents look at what they're doing as very transactional if they only think of it as an agent.
Sure.
Right? Entrepreneurship is going to have to be longer term, self-sustaining, and no, you don't have to do everything.
Well,
you can have other people assist in that space, and then you can accomplish more for your clients and for yourself.
Yeah, to be more specific, agent and entrepreneur are actually two entirely different things, not just two ways of describing the same thing. An agent is one of the roles inside of a real estate business.
Yeah.
An entrepreneur is someone that's building the real estate business. So those are two important distinctions, or that's one important distinction to make between two different things. Real estate entrepreneurs will serve the role of agent at times when they're building their business, of course, right? I was an agent and a transaction manager and a marketing person and a sign runner and all of those things in my business for a very long time. But those are distinctly different roles. Agent is just one role inside of a real estate business. Eventually, I was very blessed to build a real estate business in which I no longer served the role of agent. I didn't work any less hard. I had other roles that I was serving inside of the business, and I was very fortunate to partner with agents in our sales team, and that role still was filled by someone. It just wasn't me. And so I think that when we only define ourselves as agents, we're basically saying I just have one job inside of the business, which means we're not actually scaling a business.
Correct. Mm-hmm. And it's only as big as you are.
It's only as big as you think.
Yeah. Or even your limitation, where you're limiting your view and your vision.
Agreed. I think when we define ourselves that way, it limits us, right?
Sure. One of the things in our business, obviously, is we go through cycles, and to make this less timeless, we're in a market that's down. I think most people would probably agree. We don't have to be pessimistic about it. You just have to be realistic.
Sure.
But the overall number of transaction count is considerably lower than it was, 2-3 years ago.
Sure.
What's some of the things that you might want to share with agents that are struggling in this market?
Sure.
When things aren't happening and the transactions don't come as easy?
So many things. One, the definition of a down market is incredibly fluid in the sense that down is always a temporary state because it's relative to where we were at one time. So, for example, on a macro level, we are down as a nation in transaction count.
Sure.
We went from, 6.5 in 2022 to 4.03 last year. So fundamentally, we're down in the amount of units trading. That's an objective measure. What it means for real estate agents, though, can be a temporary measure of whether or not we're down, because as the units traded year over year shrink, the amount of people serving the community shrinks as well.
Sure.
There tend to be fewer agents over time. And so there's a brief moment in time where there are still a large amount of agents in the business and a shrinking number of units trading every single year. That defines a down market for agents. There's less available market per agent. That is temporary. If we went down to 2 million units per year traded, that would still be temporary because, unfortunately, agents would get out of the business. But organically, the number of people serving the community tends to align with the number of units trading over a long enough time horizon. And so while we are down as a nation in units traded, we are starting to equalize again in the available market share per agent. And that is unfortunate in some senses because that does mean people are leaving the business.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that things will always be this way on a per agent basis. And so one of the things that I want to share with agents that I want them to understand is in this particular industry, there is so much noise, and a lot of that noise manifests itself in a way that makes you feel like every year has to be better than the last, or you're doing something wrong. Mm-hmm. This is sort of the the MO of many of our big box brokerages is that it is all about growth, which we always want to be thinking in terms of how we can continue to scale and grow our business.
Sure.
We also need to understand that fundamentally the available market share is going to oscillate. It's going to vary year by year, and we can only control so much of it. So the first thing I would say to agents out there is, if you're not having your prime years right now, let's clear our conscience of that a little bit and realize that as long as we're getting up every day and still doing our best and in the environment, that should be the measure of whether or not we're going to continue to be successful. We should not compare ourselves to past years. We should compare ourselves to what we feel our potential is. And our potential is going to vary at times. Our potential right now in our business may be a little bit less than it was in some of the exuberant COVID years, for example.
Sure.
It feels almost blasphemous to say that. Like, why are you telling agents it's okay to not do more every single year? Because that's what gets us into this incredibly stressed and crazy mindset. We have a down year and we think that the whole world's falling apart. So the first thing I would say is we've got to remove our emotions from the market variables. The market's going to go up, the market's going to go down, the market share is going to go up, it's going to go down. Our potential for what we can accomplish in our business is going to vary a little bit. Let's get up every single day and measure ourselves by how are we showing up to the best of our potential. If we do that every single day, long term, we're going to be just fine. Two, these are the times that make all of the other times feel like we are stealing money in a sense of how easy it is to grow our business. There was a period there where agents were making what I almost I want to choose my words carefully, but it was almost too easy to succeed in this business for a little while.
Yeah, a sign in the yard would be 90% of what you needed to do.
Exactly. And we were still paid really handsomely for that, right? And we got used to it being that way. And so we're earning our stripes now a little bit.
Sure.
Right? I'm not saying that the goal should just be survival. We still want to thrive in this market environment. What I am saying is that there is value in having to work harder for the same result because it re-ingrains your habits, it reproves to you what you're capable of, and it sets you up for future success. And so I also want to encourage agents to appreciate the times that we go through, all the times that we go through. Appreciate when it gets a little easier, appreciate when it gets a little bit harder, because you're always gaining something. When it's a little bit easier to gain financially, you may not be building the skill set that you need to build to weather other storms. When it's a little bit more difficult to hit your goals, you're gaining something entirely different, and that is the skill set and the resilience to thrive in any market environment. How many agents do we know that when the market shifted, they just had no idea what to do anymore?
Sure.
Because they may have gotten into the business in a totally different market environment, and they never really built the skills to weather the type of storm that we've seen. And so this is a blessing one way or another. The other thing I would say, the last point on this is, a mentor of mine says this all the time. There has never been a market that doesn't have enough market share for you to hit your goals. Even here, we're in North Texas. In North Texas, if I was to capture 1% market share of the North Texas real estate market, even if it's the worst year,
sure,
it'd be like $1 billion in GCI or something like that, right? So the third thing I would say is we have to be careful around blaming the market for our woes as well. We should be appreciative of these times because everyone faces the same market challenges when they wake up every single day. It's how you respond to them and what you do. And I see agents that are getting back to the fundamentals, succeeding at a very high level. And I see agents that are looking for shiny objects as a way out of a difficult market environment, floundering and getting frustrated and acting like it's the market's fault, and that's not the case.
Yeah, like there's one trick pony that could get you out of anything.
Sure.
There's not. Right. You're going to have to fulfill and do a lot of the work yourself.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably one trick pony that'll get you out of it. It's this thing. It's just whether or not you want to pick it up and do the work. And so I think that these times can be a blessing because those that are willing to get back to the basics are going to succeed not just now, but in they're going to succeed at a much higher level when the market starts to become a bullish market again.
Yeah, and I do appreciate you pointing out the fact that even a negative market creates an opportunity for you to refocus and get re-energized on things you should be doing.
Sure.
I know. I mean, I was guilty of that for sure. I mean, I don't know. I sold like 127 houses myself that year, and then it just continued to drop because I got really lazy with my own sphere of influence.
Sure.
So I got real religious with that, read every book on it, and then redesigned an entire system that I share with people. I want everybody else to be able to learn how to tap into their sphere and be able to generate those opportunities again.
So what's the I don't want to derail the conversation, but the elevator pitch on your organization, your system around your sphere. Because I have a lot of this is what I do, primarily for a living, is help agents set up systems in their business and coach them around how to run those systems.
I throw a few tips because I've spent a lot of time, I read Millionaire Agent was where I started at, or like Gary Keller. I think everybody should at least read that because there's several things in there that's a core fundamental thing that's true for any type of real estate, right? You only really want to go and chase sellers, and because you can double your business through that, and you can build your entire business on that. And he also talked about at some point 4 to 5 years into the business, you should only be working sphere of influence.
Right.
That's really where everybody should get. The conversion rate is like 95%, right? I mean, it's incredibly
exponentially higher.
And my consistently, sales would sit around 95% on total closed sphere of influence for the year. But that was dropping because I wasn't staying in front of them.
Right.
So simple things, I categorize every single person in my phone, in my contacts. I use this system called Lists built into Apple. It's really easy to do.
Yeah.
Everyone has an Apple phone. You can do it. They have another type of category you can use on the Google phone. And then I would define them as agent because I track agents because I have a relationship with agents. Obviously, I'm building a podcast for agents. And then I would do primary, secondary, depending on my relationship with the individual. And then I would have other. Other is like my doctor, a contractor, people that I need in my phone that I don't need to enroll in anything. Every person on my primary and secondary gets continuous contact with me through various means. And then beyond that, I sit down every week with somebody new in my database. And we don't talk real estate.
Yeah.
I just want to see how they're doing.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
And what's what I love about that is it's entirely uncomplicated. This is something that I spend so much time coaching agents on, is deconstructing all of the complexities that they've built in their business and just making it very simple. I can't tell you how many agents I've gone into their CRMs in coaching sessions and I'm like, why do you have so many tags and categories and all these different, this is unusable.
Yeah.
You are trying to hyper define your database. It's almost like the exercise of organizing your database you feel like is the productive thing. Well, no, being in contact with your database is the productive thing. And the easier you make that, the more you're going to actually execute. So I tell people, I give them my way of defining my database, and I tell people, you can either use my way or take my way and build a way that's just as simple but makes sense to you.
Sure.
So primary, secondary, and other, I have A, B, and C. A, and I use mnemonic devices. Yeah. If I use mnemonic devices, I can remember things a lot easier. A are the people that would bail you out of jail. B are people that it wouldn't be weird to have lunch with. So if I called you up and say, hey, let's grab coffee, like that wouldn't take any expansion of my comfort zone. Yeah. Like that's how close you are to me, right? C is everybody else that knows your name. That's your entire database. People that are closest to the people in the world to you that they'd bail you out of jail. People that it wouldn't be weird to have lunch or coffee with. Everybody else that if they heard your name, they would know who you were talking about. Your goal is to move these people to becoming these people by being in contact with them. And I say at a baseline, you need to be in contact with each one of these people every 90 days in one way, shape, or form. Now, obviously, your A people, it's probably going to be much more than once every 90 days. But at a minimum, if I sat down and did a thought exercise and I organized the people in my world into A, B, and C, and then I built a simple system inside my CRM to say, these are the people that I need to talk to today. Invite to coffee, right? Reshare, develop that relationship, ask how I can be of service to them, or just generally just get in front of them, not even talk real estate. If I did that every 90 days, even for my C people, there's not a chance that I wouldn't be having consistent referrals that would help me hit my goals.
Sure.
The problem is we over-define and over-systematize, and we make it so complicated.
We get so concerned about everything that we send out, every message, everything that we do, and we make it, I just shared with you before this event is that I've got a system where I can text everybody in my database, 4 times a year, and it sends out a generic text. It's not Have you seen the baseball game last night?
Right.
No, it's like, hey, I'm updating my contacts. I just want to make sure you have the latest one.
Yeah. Love
And,
that.
and then we can pick up the mansion search, or you can have something fun with it.
Sure.
And 99% of my database can take that message. Not a big deal. And I get continuous responses to them.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks, even if it's just that.
Yeah.
But I get some that are like, hey, I was thinking about reaching out to you. And people that I would have never called, they would be C's for me.
Yeah.
Like I never even met with, some of them. It's amazing if you just put into practice simple things, you will get returns on that, and it costs almost nothing.
That's the other thing.
It doesn't cost much to do
We
this.
go down
It's
these
one of my core
rabbit holes.
principles.
Isn't it crazy that people will pay a big box lead company out there like 50% referral fee, but they won't just text people that know their name?
I think I think the implication, just like anything else, right? If you see a house that costs way more than the other, it must be just a better home. If I'm going to spend all of my money, I know that my close rate must be higher and that it must be a higher quality. It's a psychological thing.
I had never thought. I need to take a note of that. This is why we do podcasts.
Yeah, but it's the same thing with coaching. If you are $10 a month for your coaching, that's what you're worth.
That's what you're
But
worth.
if I told you it's $2,000 a month, you think they're going to show up?
Of course, you're much more
everything
accountable.
changes, even if you gave them the same material.
Yep, this is it. I could not agree more. And
it's
we
incredible.
could Jesse's going to have to snap me out of going down the rabbit hole. But you're 100% right. Some of the coaching programs that I run, we have a transaction based model versus a fee based model where you are accountable. Like you're either accountable up front or you're paying a larger portion on the back half. I could show you the show up rate to coaching sessions and the productivity of those agents that are committed up front exponentially higher than those that aren't paying until they sell something.
Well, yeah, of course.
Skin in the game.
Right, 100%.
Right.
Even if it costs them more. What's the incentive to do it on the back end?
It's.
I mean, it's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity, and it's funny because it's so much easier
but it's working against you psychologically.
100%. It's easier to get someone to sign up for something where they're not paying anything up front.
Yeah.
And also to maintain their engagement and commitment is exponentially harder because they have no commitment to it.
That's right.
Right. And usually that means that it's not as effective because part of being coached is being coachable. And so if I don't have skin in the game, then I'm usually less coachable. And it's just interesting how you parlay that to lead sources as well. We somehow value leads that cost more, which is so silly.
Well, check this out, Brian. I'm setting up a system where I'm going to be adding agents, and my referral to my agents is 25%.
Okay.
Okay. It's not 50, it's not 75, but they're not responsible for anything. And I know that I will be able to fill those positions.
Yeah.
It isn't so much the split. I know everyone gets so consumed about split. They're going to make $300,000 a year and they never have to do marketing or put a sign in the yard.
Yeah.
I'm going to strip them down to just hyper customer focus. And there's going to be a long checklist of things we do for customers, but everybody wins. When you do the long list of things for customers, you don't miss.
Oh, yeah.
You know what your audience is. You know what you're selling. You know everything.
Yep.
And then when you know everything, you can even parlay that into the buyer that buys that home. If you represent them, I can guarantee the home to them because I know everything about the house. And I'll buy the house back within 2 years. That's a whole crazy scenario of how to approach real estate. And it's a unique selling proposition.
Sure.
I'm not going to specifically talk about the way I'm doing it, but anyone out there, you need to have some type of unique selling proposition to your buyers or sellers to set yourself apart, or you're just a commodity.
100%.
Broker names to me are commodities in general. I used to think very little of them. And I think agents have the same thing. 3 agents show up to a listing appointment. The first one says, I'll do it as cheap as I can. Stop racing to the bottom, everyone. Nobody wins. The client gets less.
Yeah.
Agents can't survive on 1%.
Yeah.
That's not going to. You can't even survive on 3%, really, because you don't get enough of them in order to be able to pay your bills.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then the second agent shows up and says, "Whatever, Mr. Customer, whatever you want to list for, tell me the price.
Yep.
I'll do the listing." And they know it won't sell.
Sure.
But they just want the listing.
Yep.
And the third one offers guarantees and says, I'm going to guarantee this, or I'm going to do this. And they offer unique selling propositions, not just I stick the sign in the yard, put in the MLS and start praying.
Exactly.
What if we didn't use the MLS? That's another powerful thing that nobody's talking about. I know it's a whole nother conversation.
No, it is. We could go down a rabbit hole there, but there's some really, really good conversations around the value of agency outside of a centralized database. But that could be an entire another conversation.
Well, let me share, because I don't want to leave it there and everybody think I'm like anti-agent. What the purpose is, if you're a buyer and you see 2 houses that are identical, One is on the MLS where everybody can see it. It devalues it, right? Is a house worth less in 90 days that doesn't sell, or is it worth more?
That's a really good
What
point.
if you hide all of that from them?
Yeah.
Buyer sees it 90 days down the road, no idea that, anyone's seen it. They think they have exclusive access to it. That value of that property soars.
It's an interesting thought. I had never considered the idea that whenever you have your home on the market, well, one, I mean, it's a pretty much a default thought that as soon as your home hits the MLS, you're freezing your appreciation in time, right? Because the longer it's on the MLS, I can't start asking more for it.
No,
obviously.
it devalues.
So so it actually goes backwards.
It
right?
does.
So that's an interesting thought I had never considered.
I'll compound that. Also, you're paid to sell a house, not to list a house. Okay, this is an important distinction. What does a seller want? They want the most net. Okay, in order for me to isolate and get you the most net, I would need to isolate it away from, and I'm not trying to get other agents to sell it. I'm trying to get buyers to buy it.
Right.
Okay, and not to make everybody competitive, but I'm just saying the objective for me is to sell the home, not list it and run up my chink on Zillow and how many listings I get. The objective is to focus and hyper focus on a buyer that'll buy it. Whatever you can do to do that is your unique selling proposition. Whatever you can do to isolate yourself where you can promote it, get maximum focus on buyers, not agents.
How do you, in that case, if we were to play that out, this is normally, I mean, this is how the market does operate in certain areas, like New York City, for example, and things like that.
They have open MLSs. They're opens.
Opens,
Yeah.
and
that means anybody, for those out there, it means anybody can list it. Anyone that brings the buyer gets paid.
Yeah.
If you don't, then you don't get paid.
And there's also, at the asset level, there's much more specificity to every individual property in Manhattan, for example, right? And so I think the valuation of a property is so much more. It's very specific to the unique attributes of that property. How would that scale to an area like North Texas, where let's just say there was no MLS? There's no MLS, and so disclosure in a non-disclosure state becomes an interesting caveat.
Well, ironically, the MLS helps a non-MLS be better.
That's what I'm saying.
Because it has comps and it has comparable properties. So I still need MLS.
You're 3.2, 2,000 square foot, 3.2 in Little Elm, Texas.
Yeah.
Outside of a community MLS, or a joint a Netris, for example, how do we comp that property? And as a buyer, how do I know I'm buying something at the right asset price, I suppose? Because those are much more, I hate to use the word commodity, but those homes
they're homogenous.
are homogenous.
That's right.
Right? So in a non-disclosure state, removing the MLS, now it's much harder to determine value, I would think, over a long enough period of time.
Well, it is. And the MLS still adds value to non-MLS. I'm going to say that again. I know it's kind of like an oxymoron, but the objective is if the MLS still drives comps, it still derives value, it still does things that's beneficial. When you choose to be competitive by not utilizing it, because maybe you go 10 or 14 days and say, I'm not going to stigmatize my listing at a price that doesn't sell and devalue it. Instead, I'm going to run it without the MLS. And if it doesn't move, now my seller is going to be more willing to say, you're right, it's not worth 300, it's worth 290.
So
then I don't list it at 300 now. I list it for 290.
So when I put it on the MLS,
so I can move faster too. There's
That's
other
true.
compounding benefits too.
It's also true that we think that we value homes based on comparable sales, but that's not actually true over a long enough time horizon. We have a benchmark. Comparables are a lagging indicator of what homes were once worth.
Sure, of course.
What homes are actually worth now is much more tied to wages, asset prices, and interest rates. We start with the benchmark using comps, and then comparables change over time because they are a lagging indicator. So with interest rate changes, wage changes, and asset price volatility, then the comparables themselves shift. And so actually what drives prices is how much money people make, what they have to spend to borrow money.
Sure.
Right. And then what other homes are selling for is like a lagging indicator. So I would wonder if a long enough time horizon.
If there's a way to use that instead of
That's
comps,
what I'm saying. I think over a long enough time horizon, that would be the way that you would do it is how much does this house cost me on a monthly basis with the current market variables and how much can I afford to spend? Can I afford? Yeah, I mean, it would be messy in the beginning because people would be still asking probably, prices that aren't tied to anything. But I think over a long enough period of time, it's like, how much does a Coke cost? Coke costs what people will spend on it.
Of course.
If if a Coca-Cola costs $12, it would quickly come back down to $1.50 because that's how much people make, and that's how much they would generally spend on a Coca-Cola. I feel like that would organically just bring prices back into whack on its own.
Yeah, at some point, that AI will just give us values.
I think that's. I mean, and truly,
it can probably do a better
give
job.
Us values.
Right,
all we're talking about AI doing is just cultivating information at a faster rate.
Sure.
I don't think that AI is going to actually drive or determine values. It just does a better job of combining useful information and spitting out a result, a usable result.
More than that, nobody cares about appraiser except for the lender.
Right.
So whatever the lender needs to do.
And appraisers care about themselves a lot.
Yeah, they probably like having jobs. But to oversimplify it,
we've all been in a deal where an appraiser
would you buy a house?
I
may not want an appraisal. Why would I pay for one? I'm comfortable with what I'm buying it for.
Yeah.
I don't need someone else putting up a reason why I can't buy it.
If you want to just talk about what I think is the first piece of the transaction that's probably on its way to being mostly automated, it would be the appraisal, I think.
I think if you 10% down, no appraisal. I mean, if you're willing to put
10% down, no appraisal, and I think honestly, just based on the inspection report, you could get appraisals way for the most part. Because what is the range of risk? What is the upper and lower band of risk that a lender is taking on whenever they purchase a property? Well, you have lagging indicators, which are the comparables. You know what the interest rate is going to be, what the person makes, and then the only other variable is what is the property actually worth. Outside of the comparables and everything else you take consideration, it would be what condition is it in. And so, with a 40-page inspection report, I pretty much know within a certain band whether or not you're buying a home that's been completely hollowed out and burned to the ground or a home that's in brand new condition. There's a certain threshold of risk that a lender is going to be willing to take. And I think with a simple LLM that can read an inspection report and spit out a quality score, you could probably do away with appraisals pretty quickly. That sounds like a mean thing to say, but I hate to not be transparent about where we're probably heading.
Well, we know AI is going to replace a lot of things. Mm-hmm. First one I thought it was lawyers.
Yeah.
Think about the level and the detail of every single law that applies to a particular thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
And one particular lawyer did do this, wrote his entire thing, used it, and it gave the court cases to the judge to review.
Yeah.
And it invented one of the court cases.
Yeah.
Have you seen this? This is hilarious.
I've heard about this.
Obviously, long term, that's not going to happen, but it's just funny that there's a lot that they can do and create and spend. I mean, they would have spent 30 hours researching this with their.
Yeah. That's what, from when it comes to the legal side, what I think is first to go on the legal side is obviously, there's an enormous amount of billable hours that just go to task-oriented stuff that could just be pretty much automated, right? Like, I'm talking about entity formation, things like that, right? Like simple mergers and acquisitions of companies that are doing less than $5 million in revenue, right? Like, there's so much that is not super complex. Which is actually, this is something I think that attorneys and hopefully they see for themselves, is like, what I think this actually does is it probably increases the opportunity for legitimate litigation, legitimate legal standing, like real lawyering. I don't know if that's the right word, right? But when somebody is going to trial for a really serious event in their life, whether that's anything from a murder trial to custody or something like that, that doesn't take the letter of the law, it's the ability to build a case. I think that AI enhances attorneys' ability to build a better case. Also, I think that as you have essentially two AIs building cases against each other, this actually enhances the value of a real human attorney that can think outside the box. Because I think that even though the more powerful AI gets, if it's still using existing data, then we always have the ability to improve the system. There's going to be something interesting about using synthetic data in the future. But I actually think that lawyers can be empowered to be better at being lawyers in the type of stuff that you would gladly pay someone to do, rather than something you feel you have to pay someone to do because it's like what you're supposed to do. Like, you can't, when I'm forming a new LLC and I want my operating agreement to be super tight, I usually pay an attorney to do that. That's such easy work for them. that it can almost be automated.
Sure.
You know what I mean? If I'm defending myself from something incredibly significant and I need to build a real case, I want my attorney to still be able to think like a human being, and I would gladly pay a lot of money for that to happen. So, interesting use case.
Since we're talking about technology, right, that's going to be a real impact for most agents, right? The technology effect and empowering them, and then how it affects their growth.
Yeah.
What's some thinking that you've had regarding this space?
So I try to boil everything down to simple principles and start from those first principles. The simple principles in running a real estate business are that there are only 5 things that make you money. I believe there are only $5 productive activities in a real estate business. The first one is setting appointments. So lead generating and setting appointments to interview for the position of representing a buyer or seller in a transaction. That is a $1 productive activity. Actually running those appointments and sitting face to face with a client and helping to or deciding whether or not you are the right fit for them as a representative. That's a $1 productive activity. Negotiating the agreement that you have with your clients, meaning coming in and not being that agent that just says, I'll do it for whatever percentage, right?
Sure.
Racing to the bottom. Okay. So that's a $1 productive activity, is actually negotiating your agreements with your clients. Negotiating contracts, the actual purchase and sale contract, navigating that transaction process. That is a $1 productive activity. I like to say at current, this may not be true in the future because I don't know how deals will be done in the future, but I like to say that going to closings is a $1 productive activity right now, solely because I think it's the best way. If you've done a good job of representing a client, getting to that closing table is a great personal touch, and it's the great way to continue that forward momentum with the referrals and things like that, right? So I almost put that as kind of a $4.5 productive activities. But those 4 are the only things in real estate that make an agent money.
You can generally assign out almost everything else.
Everything else, generally, I wouldn't even say specifically, you absolutely can. Yeah. And I was blessed to be living proof of it for a very long time. And when I built our sales team, that was the conversation I would have with agents around our value proposition as a team. I really didn't like sitting in an appointment with an agent and them saying, well, like, what does the team do for me? And rattling off the hundreds of thousands of things we could possibly do for them at any given moment. What I would always talk about is the 5 things we don't do for them. You're going to still do these 5 things. You're going to set appointments, run appointments, negotiate agreements, negotiate contracts, and I want you to go to your closings. We're going to do everything else. We're going to give you the opportunity to set appointments by providing you the leads, right? We're going to take over your transactions and your agreements when you get them under contract, and everything else that doesn't make you money, we're going to handle, right? So when we're thinking in terms of technology, the place where we need to be thinking about technology as being useful in our business is everything that isn't dollar productive right now. For the purpose that should give us more dollar productive hours back in our day. Where I see agents making inefficient decisions right now is spending a lot of time, energy, money, and focus thinking about how they can use technology to automate some of the dollar productive activities. I can't tell you how many times I've seen on social media or had conversations where agents are thinking deeply around how they can use AI voice agents to handle incoming lead flow. And I'm like, if you can do that, you might as well just quit, because as soon as that's possible, you're no longer valuable in this business. I mean, it's just the truth, right? If I can go and build an AI agent that will go prospect for me, what is to stop every venture capital firm on earth from going and investing hundreds of millions of dollars into better agents, and now mine don't stand a chance? Do you really want to get into that fight?
Sure. I can see that.
I don't, right?
Yeah.
I want to be the one doing the dollar productive activities, not because I don't think it can be done. It's just that as soon as it can be done, now I'm competing against everybody with more money, more capital, more resources,
Sure.
more brain power than I'm ever going to have in my body, in my business. So I want to focus solely on the dollar productive activities.
Specifically, you don't want to compete at that level or that.
I don't think it's possible for me to compete at that level, right? And so I'd rather stay off the playing field, and I would rather decide the game that I'm going to play. The game that I'm going to play is, how do I use technology to keep myself in the areas of the business that I know that I am best suited for, and that I know I bring unique skills and a unique value proposition to. I know that I'm the best person to be talking to a prospect around why they should be working with me. I know that I'm the best person to be handling objections from somebody who has a skewed viewpoint of where the market is at right now. I know that I'm the best person to be negotiating the best deal for my client. I know that I'm the best person to be navigating a difficult repair amendment with my client, things like that. I don't want to automate those things. If I can automate those things, what am I doing here in the first place, right?
Sure.
It may work for a small moment in time, but as soon as that can be automated, then it's pretty much game over for us as agents, because there's going to be a lot more money flowing into this space.
Well, what happens is there is still quite a bit of time before we would see the replacement of agents, because there's certain elements that are not really replaceable. AI can't experience, right, the home or have that connection with the buyer and seller and understand the emotional side. There's a lot of things it can't do, but the more it can do, it will devalue what we are worth for what we do.
Well, it will actively. So it's an interesting point that you say that. So I thought a lot about this, as you can tell. You just made a really good reference to the emotional navigation of a transaction. That what we really do as agents is we help to understand the unique issues that each one of our clients is facing and help them navigate what could be the biggest transaction of their lives.
And provide realistic outcomes.
And provide realistic outcomes.
Most agents cannot provide realistic outcomes without experience.
And here's the thing. The more that we automate in our business, the more that we slowly, then quickly, gradually, and then fast, we change the expectations of the client so that these transactions become less emotional by default. This is already happening. There is a generation of human beings, okay, that is used to buying everything online. They're used to being exponentially less emotional about transactions, and they are going to be the next generation of home buyers and sellers. This is already happening in other industries. There was a time when you didn't buy stocks without going to your stockbroker's office to talk to him.
That's what I did 20 years ago.
Exactly. Now, I mean, I literally have to be disciplined. And whenever I make a trade, Jesse knows this because we have a long-running relationship with Carnival Cruise Lines. And I will write an investment thesis in an actual Word document before I invest in a stock, just because I want to mentally have an argument as to why I'm putting my money in a certain area, right? But it's so easy to start a Robinhood account and then just spend your entire life savings on something that you have no attachment to whatsoever, right? There's automobile vending machines now, right? Yeah. You can't go to a used Tesla dealership. You can only buy a used Tesla from Tesla online through their used portal, and you will never see it in person until you own it. Talk about unemotional. That's a $80,000 purchase, and I'm not even going to see it until it gets here. But I have trust in the brand and their automations and all that type of stuff. I'm painting a picture of how we are getting less emotional about transactions as a society. Online dating is probably the best example. We're getting much less emotional about transactions as a society. It's
funny, we're evaluating everybody by points and maybe a video, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible.
When we remove the emotions from real estate transactions, which will be the last bastion of emotional transactions, that's when I think that's when we as agents have lost that last bit of the one unique thing that we can provide the transaction.
Sure.
That's not a death knell for real estate agents, by the way. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that I want agents to be focused more on how they can empower themselves with technology rather than remove as much as themselves from the transaction as possible. I think that's an important distinction to make.
Sure, it is.
Right? And that obviously comes down, and we talk about technology with lead generation so much too. I think agents really, in general, have a poor ability at times to distinguish between quantity and quality when it comes to lead generation. We were just talking this, kind of about this a moment ago, right? Where 95% of your business is done with your sphere of influence. You give me 100 people that I know on a first name basis, that's better than 10,000 online leads.
It is. I'll tell you here's a tip.
Yeah.
If you can create a scenario where you make no outbound calls and 100% of the people call you, because it's reverse prospecting, it's reverse offers.
Yeah.
You make offers to people out there. I can do this for you.
Yeah.
That is a far easier conversion because they want to hear what you have.
Yeah.
instead of cold calling.
So what is for agents to gain value out of that conversation? What type of reverse offers?
Unique selling propositions.
Yeah.
If you buy my house, I'll buy yours. You got to do some things to set up for those things.
Yeah, which is becoming becoming a big offering. That
It's an easy one anybody out there can do, right? I see this all the time. Guaranteed cash offer.
Guaranteed cash offer.
That is unbelievably easy to do.
It's a gentleman that we know that sits in that seat a lot. That's huge on guaranteed cash offers.
That is
very well for him.
And not to devalue it, but I mean, it's real easy to get a cash offer on just about any property.
Sure.
So find the place to do that, and now you can make that offer and proposition. People will call you.
Yep.
I'm just giving a simple example.
Yep.
But that's making a unique selling proposition. It makes you less commoditized.
Yeah, agreed.
Right?
Anybody who hasn't read Traction, by the way, by Gino Wickman, talking about unique selling propositions and understanding what your value is. As an agent, I could not agree more. Understanding your unique value proposition is huge.
I only want to cover one more quick thing because we have more content. You were right, Brian. We talk too much. We were talking about this is really important for agents to get that emotional feeling and watching the market. It's slow and all this type of stuff. Transactions are down. Yes, a lot of agents are going to leave the market, but keep in mind, far less agents.
Right.
Market rebounds. Where does that position people that stayed? They now have a very large opportunity because it will rebound.
Yep.
Homes will get back on the market. Buyers will jump back into the system and start buying again.
Yep.
Don't lose heart. If you're selling 1 to 2 houses a month, you're going to be in a good place when this happens. If you're only selling like 5 or 6 houses a year, it isn't going to change much for you. But I would recommend you consider that we're at the place anytime, right? Economy's getting better, stock market's higher, interest rates are a lot of pressure to push them down, right? Lots of pressure to push it down. And when those things drop back in the 5s, we're going to see a pretty good uptick, I think, at buyers. That's going to create opportunities for those out there.
It will. I don't want agents to. We talked about this on a different show that I did recently. You don't want rates to go back into the 3s. I promise you that, because you'll have hyperinflation in the asset market. So we 5s would be fantastic.
Sure.
Right. Historically, 5s are fantastic. Time heals all wounds when it comes to any market. The thing that I want agents to understand is that it's not rates that are keeping the market, we're talking about the amount of transaction size. It's not rates that are keeping the market down or anything like that. It's volatility. We had rates that went from extremely low to extremely high. That affects the other 2 levers of affordability, which are asset prices and wages. What tends to happen over a long enough time horizon is that as long as rates at whatever level they're at, as long as they stay within a tight enough window and be consistent, then the other 2 factors of affordability come back into a groove. That's asset prices and wages, and you'll see transaction volume start to pick back up again. We are starting to see that. If you look at the data that just came out from Redfin, and there's numerous other sources that report similar things, you're starting to see in the back quarter of Q4 of 2025, you're starting to see supply dip down again and buyer demand slightly increase. What that means is that sellers are starting to transact again. That's why supply is starting to come a little bit back off the market. That means that they are reducing prices and getting deals done. We get so trained as real estate agents to think that price is coming down is a bad thing. It is not. We need prices to get back into a tradable range where I make this money at my job. I make this much money at my job. Yeah. This is how much I can afford to spend on a house. Given a long enough time horizon, that will happen so long as interest rates stay relatively consistent. The reason for that is because people don't normally move because it's a financial decision. People move because of family, occupation, recreation, dreams, the things that we all learn in sales school, right? And given I'm going to try to say this in a way that's understandable. People will not move for financial reasons, but people will not move for financial reasons. What I mean by that is people that were going to move last year,
the
2 years
barriers are too high for them to consider moving. Yeah, for
people
sure.
that were going to move 2 years ago that had a different expectation of what their pricing should be, they will decide to just hang on. Mm-hmm. People that have a life event that they want to sell or buy now, it has been a long enough period of time since those expectations were set that now they're tired of waiting and they're going to transact. People are getting over the fact that prices ran up for a long time. They're starting to trickle back down. We're hearing less of, well, my neighbor sold a year ago and he got this, right? I bought, my friend bought 2 years ago and he paid this or got this interest rate. We're hearing less of that. Like I said, time heals all wounds.
Sure.
And
it's starting to get separated from where the extreme aspects were.
And so I say, as an agent, we're in a really great time right now because I believe that we're at the trough as far as transaction sides. We've got to be in forward momentum every day as an agent right now, in contact with your database, providing them value, hammering out your unique selling proposition, because it is only going to pick up from here. And you don't want to be the person who's starting to push the boulder back up the hill when we get back into a bull market. You want to have a head of steam, and now is the time to build it. So if agents that feel like they're sitting on the sidelines right now until the market improves, quote unquote, get involved, get back in touch with your database, get your A, Bs, and Cs, or your primary, secondary, other, whatever it is, and start having those consistent conversations and filling your pipeline. There's no time like right now to be doing that.
All right. I know you share a lot of these things. You've got a newsletter you call Leading with Force. So that is something that people can subscribe to, I assume?
Yeah, I think if you just had I make it really easy. It's just my name. If you go to brianforce.com, you can always sign up for my newsletter. It comes out every Tuesday, and I just it's my way of just condensing my rabbit holes into one little weekly newsletter of my thoughts on business, markets, opportunities, and all those things every single week. So go to brianforce.com and check it out.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian, for doing this with me.
I really appreciate it, brother. I'd love to come back anytime.
All right, for those out there that have not subscribed, if you like our content and some of these interviews that we are doing, more content just like we did with Brian, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I'm on Spotify. I'm on Apple Podcasts as well. So if you can subscribe there, I appreciate it. And until then, have a high performance week. I appreciate it.
That wraps up another episode of Real Estate Success DFW. I hope you're leaving with new insights that push your real estate career forward. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with fellow agents who's ready to succeed. And if you're interested in working together or have any questions, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out to me directly. My personal phone is 214-228-0383. Let's connect and make real estate success happen together. Until next time, keep pushing forward. I'm Shaune Corbett, and this is a Real Estate Success